In this video, I'll show you a way to conditionally execute multiple lines of code. To begin, let's pick up the code as it was at the end of the previous video. Just like before, I'm going to use JavaScript comments to have JS ignore the code while I make some updates to it. So let me add a brand new comment right here where I'm assigning an empty object to the numbers variable. I'll point the cursor to the very beginning of this line of code, and right here I'm going to type a / and an asterisk. Next, I'll press the Shift-Enter keyboard shortcut to move the remaining code one line down. Now I can close my comment by adding an asterisk and a / at the very bottom of this code. Alright, so that practically means that now I have two multi-line comments. Since there's no other code, pressing the Enter here will cause the JavaScript engine to ignore the whole thing. Okay, so now I'll use the Ctrl-L shortcut key to clear the console. Then I'll press the up arrow once to get back the previously executed code, which is those two multi-line comments. Now, under the second multi-line comment, I'll declare a variable, let gameChoice equals prompt. Inside of the prompt's parentheses, I'll add a string of press 1 for the old game or 2 for the new game. And after the closing parenthesis, I'll press the Shift-Enter shortcut to get onto yet another new line. I'll add an if statement here, whose condition is a claim that the value of gameChoice is the number 1 as a string, because, remember, the prompt will convert the number of 1 to the string of 1. Next, after the closing parenthesis of the condition here, I'll add a space and an opening curly brace. I'll press Shift-Enter to get onto the next line again, and here I'll just add a console log with a string that reads old game running. I'll press yet another Shift-Enter to get onto yet another line without the JS engine executing any of my code up to this point. And I'll type a closing curly brace. Now I'll add another line, and here I'll add another if statement. In the second if statement, I'll verify that the value of the gameChoice variable is equal to the number 2 as a string data type. If it is, I'll open a multi-line block of code using curly braces, and inside of them, on a separate line, I'll console log the string that reads new game running. It's time to test my code now. And I get the first prompt where I type a 1 into it. This triggers the code inside the first if statement, and the string of old game running is logged to the console. Now I want you to pay close attention to what I'll do. I'll clear the console, press the up arrow to get to the code of the previous execution, and cut all the code of the first comment. I'll paste it in right here, inside the first if statement's code block. I'll now repeat the process with the second if statement and the second comment. Since the pasted in code is not properly formatted, I'll highlight the section that's not indented, and with this code being highlighted, I'll press the Tab key once to indent it, so that it nicely lines up and looks like it should, as being a part of the if code block. As a quick side note, this indentation is important in JavaScript because it makes your code more readable, but a non-indented piece of code will not affect code execution. So, in essence, it's not compulsory to do this, it just looks better. In other words, even if I didn't indent this comment that's now inside the if statement, my code would still work the same. Okay, so now that I've made all these changes to my code, I'll have the JS engine run it. This time, it starts with a prompt, like the previous time I tried it, but now it executes the console log of old game running. And then it skips over the comment. If I clear the console and rerun the last command, and this time type the number 2, the console log now outputs the string of new game running and again skips over the comment. So essentially, the code is working exactly the same as it did before. The point that I wanted to make here is that you can still put a comment inside an if statement and it will work just fine. Let me now remove the comment delimiters from both the first multi-line comment in the first if statement and from the second multi-line comment in the second if statement. And I'll also clean it up further by removing the empty lines of code inside each of the if statements. Now I can execute this updated code. So I first type in the number 1 to choose the old game. Then I get another prompt, so I type in, for example, the number 10. Finally, I get yet another prompt, so I type in, for example, the number 11. After I've finished all of this, I get the output in the console, which says that number 1 is less than number 2. Feel free to try out different answers to the prompt. But before you do, please note that there's actually a bug in this code right now. Let me show you what it is. So I'll run the app again. I'll press 1 in the first prompt to choose the old game. Then I'll type the number 5 as the first input. And then I'll type the number 10 as the second input. And instead of reporting that number 1 is less than number 2, my program falsely reports that number 1 is equal to or greater than number 2. What is the problem here? Well, it's the fact that I'm comparing strings, not numbers. Remember that I've told you earlier that the prompt here saves the user input as string? So even if I type a number, it saves it as a number of the string data type. In essence, it just looks like a number, but it's not really a number because, remember the earlier lesson, when you use strings you tell JavaScript to ignore the rules of maths and not apply them. It still applies some rules, but as we've just proven, those rules might feel very weird. I'll teach you about those rules in depth later, but for now, just know the following. If I claim that the string of 5 is less than the string of 10, I'll get back a false Boolean value. Okay, so that's it for this video. To sum up, you've learned several things in it. For example, you've learned that you can nest if statements inside other if statements in JavaScript. Similarly, you can nest prompts inside if statements. You can also nest comments inside if statements and add custom pieces of code of random length. Additionally, you've learned that you can execute code that consists only of comments, but that will not do anything. Finally, I've shown you that comparing numbers as strings can make your apps buggy and might leave you wondering what's happening in a piece of code. In the next video, I'll show you a simple solution for these issues, and then we'll move on to discuss functions.